Hello, we are Group 5 and we will report about the vertical integration and diversification. First, what is corporate strategy? Corporate strategy is the way a company creates value through the configuration and coordination of its multi-market activities. Corporate strategy is the decision that senior management makes and the goal-directed actions it takes to gain and sustain competitive advantage in several industries and markets simultaneously. The goal of corporate strategy is to build corporate advantage so as to earn above normal returns. It addresses where to complete along three dimensions: the product and services, industry value chain, and geography. The vertical integration, it is stages of industry value chain. An organization should vertically integrate when cost of making the product inside the company are lower than the cost of buying that product in the market. Second is geographic scope, or regional, national, and global markets. Geographic scope means the area covered by a model or an analysis used to calculate physical changes resulting from a proposed project. And lastly, the horizontal integration, which is products and services. Horizontal integration is one of the most common types of mergers. As a result of horizontal integration, competitors in the same market combine their operations and assets. An example of horizontal integration would be if two consulting firms merge, which is a good example of horizontal integration. The Facebook and Instagram. Both companies operated in the same industry in the social media and shared similar production stages in their photo sharing services. The dimensions of corporate strategy. One is the core competencies. Core competencies are unique strength embedded deep within a firm. Core competencies allow a firm to differentiate its product and services from those of its rivals, creating higher value for the customer or offering products and services of comparable value at lower cost. According to the resource-based view of the firm, a firm boundaries are delineated by its knowledge bases and competencies. Second is economies of sales. Occur when the firm average cost per unit decrease as its output increase. The third is economies of scope. Economies of scope in turn are the savings that come from producing two or more outputs or providing different services at less cost than producing each individually, though using the same resources and technology. For example, if you guys heard the website Amazon, Amazon is like Lazada and Shopee. Amazon benefits from economies of scope. It can offer a large range of different products and services categories at a lower cost than it would take to offer each product line individually. Next is transaction cost. Are all costs associated with an economic exchange. The concept is to develop in transaction cost economics, a strategic management framework, and enables to answer the questions of whether it's cost effective for their firm to expand its boundaries through vertical integration or diversification. The boundaries of the firm. Determining the boundaries of the firm so that it's more likely to gain and sustain a competitive advantage is the critical challenge in corporate strategy. A theoretically framework in strategic management called transaction cost economics explain and predict the boundaries of the firm. Insights gained from transaction cost economic helps managers decide what activities to do in-house versus what services and products to obtain from the external market. Given the efficiencies of free markets, why do firms even exist? The key insight of transaction cost economics is that different situational arrangement, markets versus firm, have different costs attached. To start, we need to identify transaction cost. What is transaction cost? Transaction cost, all internal and external associated with an economic exchange, whether within a firm or in markets. These are all internal and external costs associated with an economic exchange, whether it takes place within the boundaries of a firm or in markets. The notion of transaction cost, it shows the respective internal transaction cost within firm A and firm B, as well as external transactions that occur when the firm A and firm B do business with one another. Next is external transaction cost. These are the costs of searching for a firm or an individual with whom to contact, and then negotiating, monitoring, and enforcing the contract. When companies transact in open market, they occur external transaction cost. The cost of searching for a firm or individual with whom to contract, and then negotiating, monitoring, and enforcing the contract. Then the external transaction cost. This cost pertaining to organizing an economic exchange within a hierarchy, also called administrative cost. Transaction cost can occur within the firm as well. Considered internal transaction cost, this includes cost pertaining to organizing an economic exchange within a firm. For example, the cost of recruiting and returning employees, paying salaries and benefits, setting up a shop floor, providing office space and computers, and organizing, monitoring, and supervising work. Internal transaction costs also include administrative costs associated with coordinating economic activity between business units of the same corporate such as transfer pricing or input factors, and between business units and corporate headquarters, including important decisions pertaining to resource allocation, among others. Internal transaction costs tend to increase with organizational size and complexity. Firms versus markets, make or buy. Transaction cost economics allow us to explain which activities a firm should pursue or to make versus which goods and services to obtain externally or to buy. This decision helps determine the boundaries of the firm. In some cases, cost of using the market, such as search cost, negotiating and drafting contracts, monitoring work, and enforcing contracts when necessary may be higher than integrating the activity within the single firm and coordinating it through an organizational hierarchy. Here you will see the advantage and disadvantage of firm and market. When the cost of pursuing an activity in-house or less than the cost of transaction for that activity in the market, then the firm should vertically integrate by owning production of the needed inputs or the channels for the distribution of outputs. In other words, when firms are more efficient in organizing economic activity than our markets, which rely on a contract among many independent actors, firm should vertically integrate. For example, rather than contracting in the open market for individual piece of software code, Google hires programmers to write code in-house. Owning this software develop capabilities invaluable to the firm because it costs such as salary and employee benefit to in-house computer programmers are less than what they would be in the open market. More importantly, Google gains economies of scope in software development, resources and capabilities, and reduce the monitoring cost. This is because skill acquired in writing software code for its different internet-based service offering are transferable to new offerings. Programmers working in the original proprietary software code for the Google search engine leverage these skills in creating a highly profitable online advertising business. Also, firm and markets as a different institutional arrangement for organizing economic activity have their own distinct advantage and disadvantage summarized. The advantage of firm include the ability to make command and control decision by set among clear hierarchical lines of authority. Second, coordination of highly complex tasks to allow for specialized division of labor. Third, transaction-specific investment such as specialized robotics equipment that is highly valuable within the firm but of little or no use in the external market. The last, creation of a community of knowledge. Of course, when there's an advantage, there is always the disadvantage. What is the disadvantage of organizing economic activity within firms? One is administrative cost because of necessary bureaucracy. Second is low-powered incentives such as hourly wages and salaries. These often are less attractive motivators than the entrepreneurial opportunities and rewards that can be obtained in the open market. And lastly, the principal agent problem. Principal agent problem, situation in which an agent performing an activities on behalf of a principal pursues his or her own interest. The principal agent problem is a major disadvantage of organizing economic activity within firms. It can arise when an agent such as managers, or manager performing activities on behalf of the principal or the owner of the firm pursues his or her own interest. Indeed, the separation of ownership and control is one of the hallmarks of the publicity traded company. And some degree of the principal agent problem is most inevitable. For example, a manager may pursue his or her own interests such as job security and management perks that conflicts with the principal goals, in particular creating shareholder value. One potential way to overcome the principal agent problem is to give stock option to managers, thus making them owners. Let's go now to the advantage of the market. Number one is high-powered incentives. Rather than work as a salaried engineer for an existing firm. For example, an individual can start a new venture offering specialized software. High-powered incentives of the open market include the entrepreneur's ability to capture the venture's profit. Second is increased flexibility. Transacting in markets enables those who wish to purchase goods to compare prices and services among many different providers. Let's go now to the disadvantage of markets. Number one is search cost. On a very fundamental level, perhaps the biggest disadvantage of transacting in markets, rather than owning the various production and distribution activities within the firm itself, entails trivial search cost. In particular, a firm faces each cost when it must score the market to find reliable suppliers from among the many firms competing to other similar products and services. Even more difficult can be the search to find suppliers when the specific products and services needed are not offered at all by firms currently in the market. In this case, production of supplies would require transaction-specific investment, an advantage of firms. Second is opportunism by other parties. Opportunism is behavior characterized by self-interest seeking with guilt, or we will discuss it more detail later. Third is incomplete contracting. Although market transactions are based on implicit and explicit contracts, all contracts are incomplete to some extent because not all future contingencies can be anticipated at the time of contracting. It is also difficult to specify expectations or to measure performance and outcomes. Alternatives on the make or buy continuum. The make and the buy choices anchor each end of the continuum from market to firms. Several alternative hybrid arrangement are in fact available between these two extremes. Moving from transaction in the market to full integration. Alternatives include short-term contracts as well as various forms of strategic alliance and parent-subsidiary relationship. Short-term contracts. When engaging in short-term contracting, a firm sends out request for proposal to several companies, which initiates competitive bidding for contracts to be awarded with a short duration, generally less than 1 year. The benefit to this approach lies in the fact that it allows a somewhat longer planning period than individual market transaction. Moreover, the buying firm can often demand lower prices due to the competitive bidding process. The drawback, however, is that firms responding to the RFP have no incentives to make any transaction-specific investments due to the short duration of the contract. The strategic alliances. Voluntary and arrangement between firms that involve the sharing of knowledge, resources, and capabilities with the intent of developing products, or services to lead to competitive advantage. Alliances have become a ubiquitous phenomenon, especially in high-tech industries. Moreover, strategic alliances can be facilitate investment in transaction-specific assets within encountering the internal transaction cost involving in owning firms in various stages of the industry value chain. Strategic alliances is an umbrella term that denotes different hybrid organizational forms, among them by long-term contracts, equity alliances, and joint ventures. Given their prevalence in today's competitive landscape as a key vehicle to execute a firm's corporate strategy. Long-term contracts. Long-term contracts help facilitate transaction-specific investments. We noted that firms in short-term contracts have no incentive to make transaction-specific investment. Long-term contracts, which work much like short-term contracts but with a duration generally greater than 1 year, help overcome his drawback. Long-term contracts help facilitate transaction-specific investment. Next is licensing, a form of a long-term contracting in the manufacturing sector that enables firms to commercialize intellectual property. Next is franchising. This is a long-term contract in which a franchisor grants to franchise the right to use the franchisor trademark and business process to offer goods and services that carry the franchisor's brand name. The franchisee in turn pays out an upfront buy in lump sum and percentage of revenues. Franchising is an example of a long-term contract. In this arrangement, a franchisor such as, for example, McDonald's, Burger King, 7-Eleven, grants a franchisee the right to use the franchisor's trademark and business process to offer goods and services that carry the franchisor's brand name. Besides providing the capital to finance the expansions of the chain, the franchisee generally pays an upfront lump sum to the franchisor plus a percentage of revenue. Lastly, the equity alliances. partnership in which at least one partner takes partial ownership in the other partner. A partner purchases an ownership share by buying stocks and thus making an equity investment. The taking of equity tends to signal greater commitment to the partnership.